and supporting women working towards a shared goal. Firm believers that no matter who we are in life, inspiring and empowering women is a must. The more we feel empowered, engaged, and informed, the better we can create a huge impact globally. It is not just about us, but enabling future generations to play a role in the world as leaders. That's why we are here for you. That's Empowering Young Women Project.
Louisiana is located in the United States. It's in the southern part of the United States, and it's had a history of racial tensions. Very much of what you'll see in Africa, particularly in South Africa, particularly in the time of when there were a lot of tensions between the whites and the blacks. It's the very same issue that we experience in the southern part of the state. But as you can see, I had a very happy childhood. This is a more recent picture of me and my family with my brother. This is a picture of me with my brother right after he was born. This is a more recent picture. As you can see, I'm very close to my brother. It's the two of us, and we have definitely persevered a lot. He's my younger brother, but he's taller than me. But I still call him my little brother. And there's a picture of my father with his horse. So growing up, my father really liked to have horses around, so I did have a chance to really have a broad childhood. So not only focusing on mathematics and modeling, but I also had a chance to really get to know nature and spend time with my family. During my university years, I actually joined a sorority. So you may not be familiar with the sorority system, but in the U.S., it gives girls when they're in university an opportunity to not necessarily party. It's not don't think of the party type thing you will probably hear when you look up sorority. The sorority that I belong to is called Delta Sigma Theta. It's actually a sorority of service, and it's a sorority of service for Black women. This allows us to go and work with children, work with adults that need help and help further their cause. One of the things that I just identified, we're actually working with a hospital that's in Kenya. The hospital was formerly called Theta Memorial Hospital, but the name is now Mary Help of the Sick Mission. Delta Sigma Theta sorority that I belong to works very frequently with this hospital and other areas around the world, particularly in Africa, to ensure that we as Black women and also Black men are able to persevere regardless of our challenges. So if any of you ever have questions about Delta Sigma Theta or the work that we're doing with Africa or even in the United States, please feel free to contact me. And then next is my husband. So I did mention in the beginning that where I grew up, it was definitely a challenge between whites and Blacks. But again, I did not let that stop me. When I met my husband, I definitely had that in the back of my mind that I grew up in a world where white people didn't necessarily like Black people that much. But after leaving that world and seeing the broader world and what it has to offer, I met my husband and fell in love. And we've been very happy ever since. He has allowed me to live the dreams that I want to live. I've been able to tour the world. We've been in Italy, we've been to Beijing, we've been to Turkey, we've lived in Europe, we've lived pretty much all over, or traveled all over. The one thing I want you to understand when I talk about being uncomfortable, it's not about having a bad hair day. It's not about the thing that you can change like that. It's not about saying, oh, I woke up today, it's a bad day, I'm going to put a hat on. It's about those moments. Uncomfortable is about those moments that you will see in your life where you achieved something big and you weren't quite sure if you could do it. You weren't sure if it was something that was meant for you. But it's definitely something that makes you feel so much different about yourself that you feel like you can conquer the world. what I want you to start doing is not look at just advice that's going to women. Start looking at advice that goes to everyone. I wish when I were your age, someone would have given me advice like this instead of just giving me advice about the boys and how I look and, it's okay to not feel good about yourself or things like that. Tell me things that will actually help further me in terms of what I'm looking for. What do I do when I want to enter a university? What are the things that I want to think about when I'm trying to pick my job, or what I'd like to do to really set myself up for success in the future? But what's important about these two pictures, this is about STEM. How many of you, and I'm going to switch back so I can see your lovely face, how many of you have heard of STEM careers? So show of hands, how many of you know what STEM is? No one's heard of STEM? All right, Esther has. All right, I'll explain STEM. So STEM is where we're trying to get girls to actually participate in mathematical or technical careers. If you are interested in math and you're interested in pursuing a career in computer programming or computer science or just something in technology, you're very interested early on, but we find later on that you tend to change your mind. So all of the technology careers that we're seeing around the world are being filled by men. Women, for some reason, lose interest. And what the slide is saying on the right, many times women are losing interest because of something called gender bias, meaning they hear that it's not a good environment for them, that it's not a safe environment for women. Women like me, women like Esther, women like Sister Brenda, even everyone around, we're all trying to understand and make sure if you are interested in a career, especially in math and science, then don't feel like you're not going to be successful. There's so many women out there that are being successful. Don't go back to being that 70%, that young girl that really is afraid to share or afraid to get out of their box. Because so many of us feel the same way, but there's so many of us that have succeeded, and we're here to help you along the way. So now, let's talk about my journey. All right. So again, this goes back to the always be uncomfortable. What I want to walk you guys through is just my journey of the lessons that I've learned, and I call them the always be's. But it starts with the always being uncomfortable. So what we'll talk about are 3 different lessons. We'll talk about always building your brand. And I know you're very young right now, but these are lessons learned that I want you to think about as you start to look for your future. Thinking about college, thinking about university, thinking about the jobs, thinking about your family. And then for lesson 2, it's about curiosity, always being curious. And then lesson 3, always making peace with failure. Everyone fails. It's a normal part of life. We all make mistakes, but you can't let those mistakes hamper you or define you. It's the mistakes that actually help you figure out how to be successful. And we'll talk about that. So in the beginning of my journey, and I actually see a bit of a typo. I wish I was this young, Esther. I'm actually a little older than that. I didn't catch this earlier. So in 1988, I'm actually 48 right now. So when this was written, I sat down when I was around your age, and I wanted to know, well, what do I want to do when I grow up? What do I want to be? And I wrote down number 1, I want to be a computer programmer. So that goes back to the STEM discussion we had earlier. I loved computer. I loved math. I just wanted to sit down and be one of those nerdy programmers with the hood on and never leave my room because I was super, super shy. The next, I wanted to become a professional model, which is very different from being a computer programmer. But I figured these women were, they were tall, I was skinny, and it was a wish. Everyone has to dream, you think big. So I was like, well, it may never happen, but you never want to stop and stop your dreams. You want to at least write them down because there may be a chance that you can achieve them. But the only way you'll do it is to actually write it down and look at it and say, all right, what can I do to make this happen? And the next, I wanted to live in a big city. I wanted to live in a foreign country. I wanted to see the world. I thought about New York. I thought about Europe. I actually didn't think about China until much later. But I grew up in Louisiana, very small town, where no one really left. I wanted to see more, and this was since I was a little girl. So I wrote those down as my goals And then I started thinking, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? Because for a person who's in that 70% of I'm really shy and I'm not quite sure what I want to do, I knew it was important for me to start putting a plan in place just to at least make number one possible. And number two, I didn't know if it was possible. I figured I would try, or at least write it down and say it was a good goal. And for the other, my parents did not want me to leave Louisiana at all. They wanted me to stay close to the family and work with the family, but I knew I could help the family and pursue my dreams at the same time. So I eventually went on to a university in Louisiana because my parents didn't want me to go very far, and I studied computer science and mathematics. But during the time in university, I actually modeled just a little. But the modeling was enough for me to actually get a contract with a modeling agency called Elite, which is a world famous modeling organization. So while I was at school, I worked really hard to ensure I was focused on finishing my studies, but I also had a chance to play a little bit and be a model. Now, I didn't get a chance to go to New York and Europe and China while I was in university, but I definitely had a chance to put the foundation in place to learn how to do my dreams. Some of my dreams, at least. But then when I graduated, I had my degree, I was done, and I had my college degree. I had modeled just a little, and I was ready to start work because, again, my parents wanted me to stay close. So I had pursued opportunities within Louisiana for work, but then modeling tapped me on the shoulder and said, we would like for you to go to China. And I was like, China? Why would I go to China? Who's modeling in China? Especially at that point in the 90s. There wasn't you didn't hear a lot about China way back then. You hear a lot about it today. So the pictures you see, this is a picture I took when I was in China for the very first time. It was all bicycles. You see today in the news, China looks like this, where it's full of cars, it's full of pollution, it's full of just everything, full of Louis Vuitton, all types of shopping, it's on and on. But when I went, it wasn't like that at all. It was very, very much just a large city with a lot of people who were trying to understand how do they build their life, how do they make the solid foundation to get to the China of today. And when I went to China, I actually started modeling quite a bit, and I won an international modeling competition, which then furthered my modeling career. So I had to say, well, do I want to be a computer programmer or do I want to be a model? Because I started modeling so much, I couldn't do both. So at that point, I made the decision to be a model. So for many years, being uncomfortable, I had to learn to really work as a model and I'm going to skip forward, building that foundation of who I am today. So the pictures you see, most of these came from China. I'm going to scroll back. As a model, it's very, very difficult to really get what we call pictures or print work. Print work is where you're actually in a magazine. And then here is a picture of what we call comp card or composite card. It's a photo, a string of photos. So that way people who want to work with you see the different looks that you have, and this is just a listing of my size, my shoe size, my waist, so on and so forth. The thing to know about modeling, and I'll talk about it in a minute, this is what we would call the foundation. It's the basic information about you as a model in terms of how can you work with other customers? How can you work with customers? The picture in the middle is actually in the backstage of a fashion show that we did in Beijing in the Imperial Palace. It was the very first fashion show that ever happened in such an iconic place in China. It was very much an honor, but in order for me to get all this work, I had to build my own brand. And part of that started was building the solid foundation. So that's, again, looking at what does it take to be a model? What does it take to be a computer programmer? In high school, what are the classes that I need to take? In university, what are the classes that I need to take for computer programming? And then as a model, what are the things that I need to do? I need to learn how to walk. The experiences I had as a model working in China actually helped me a little get my job at IBM. Just to give you a foundation, when I interviewed for my first big job, my second big job at IBM, one of the things they saw in my resume was that they said I didn't have international experience. But I said, no, I was actually a model and I worked in China. I talked about building that foundation. I talked about relationship building. I also talked about how as a model, you run your own business. And they were so impressed with that. In addition to my computer science experience, they immediately hired me because they knew I understood the importance of being global. And that's one of the problems we have today in commercial society. Many people only want to work in their one little area, but really think about broadening it. Think about how what you do in your country then impacts the rest of the world. Even if you don't have the opportunity to travel, always be aware of what's happening in the world, because you never know when those opportunities will come. And then people will start to think of you as that global thinker. They'll think of you as the person that's really good at building relationships. And they'll also think about you as the person that actually understands the basics of doing business. They understand you've got the right foundation. This was the right mix for me to be successful. The next about being curious. So if I fast forward all the way through to around the year 2012 or 11, so I've been tapped on the shoulder to be a model. I was tapped on the shoulder to work at companies like IBM and Arthur Andersen. But then while I was in the United States, I was tapped again on my shoulder to actually move to the UK. So I lived in London for 5 years, and this is actually where I met the lovely Esther, her family. And I had the opportunity to work with so many wonderful people. And I was able to do that because, again, I built that foundation. I was global. But for me to be successful, I had to be curious. I had to be very, very curious, because just because you learn those things as your foundation, there's so much more you need to know. And because of my curiosity, I was able to take the relationships that I built and also the foundation, and I was able to be much more innovative because I had reached out and was able to work across different groups. I also made fewer decision-making errors because when you're curious, you work with others. Just like you're in a classroom setting, it's important to keep that same classroom thought when you're working in big teams, because everyone knows something different. And when you bring all that to the table, it actually makes some of the best decisions ever, and you make fewer errors because everyone's made mistakes, just as I talked about earlier. And people bring those lessons learned to the table. And when you make that final group decision, it's incorporating the innovation that you have, but it's also incorporating the lessons learned. And in terms of curiosity, I spent countless hours learning about the business. Not just the business that I'd known from my past companies, but I learned about how to do business in the UK. I learned about how to do business in all the countries across Europe. I learned not just about business in terms of things like computer science and accounting, but I learned about culture. I learned about how the different cultures communicate, how they work together. And that curiosity helped me to be very successful in a person as well as in business. And I'll take you to the final lesson learned. It's making peace with failure. We're all going to make mistakes. In all of the things that I've talked about earlier, these are all lessons where sometimes I did very well, but sometimes I did not. But you have to pick yourself up. I'm sure you've heard of Oprah Winfrey. I'm going to go back to the picture and say, raise your hand if you've heard of Oprah Winfrey. Come on. All right, there we go. All right, great. You guys know. All right, so Oprah Winfrey actually failed as well. So at the age of 22, did you know she was fired from her job as a television reporter? And if you haven't heard it, it shocked me when I found out Oprah Winfrey is one of the richest women in the world. She failed when she was very young, but she did not let that stop her. They actually told her she wasn't fit for television. I don't think anyone else is more fit for television. Michael Jordan is a basketball player, so I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because you have to know who Michael Jordan is. He was actually cut from his high school basketball team. So even the people that are the most successful today, they've all failed. I failed, and I'm sure Esther and Mr. Brenda and Alfred, they can all tell you about different failures that they've had. But the one thing you have to remember is don't dwell on it for too long. Just understand what you've done, learn it, learn about, take stock, learn and adapt and make changes and try again. It's very much pick yourself up and start all over again. And don't take it personally, especially if you're that 70% shy introvert, that girl that's just really scared of her own shadow like me, like I was. It's much harder for us, but you can't take it personally and you have to fight back. One of the things that I found was music to really help me get through the tough times. Hopefully you guys have taken some of the lessons that I've learned, and hopefully I put it into a context that makes sense to you. But again, I'm happy to have more conversations with you, but just to remember, if you are interested in careers in technology, be it computer science, mathematics, you want to be, you want to run your own startup company one day, please let me know, and I'd love to work with you and understand how can I help you pursue your dream. Because in my life, I had guidance counselors and teachers who were actually telling me not to go down this path. And I said no. These were things that I wanted to do, and I was successful. And I'm still learning. There's still a lot of stuff that I need to do. My life isn't over with yet.
Thank you, Deandra. Thank you very much, first of all, for
Hi. So I wanted to ask, first, I wanted to know more information about the STEM career that you have talked about, and also the project that you said you did it in Kenya with the hospital. And also, I wanted to ask, during your modeling career, did you ever think of joining the Samantha, the one that one of the Kardashian sisters, the modeling agency? Actually, it's the biggest modeling agency. I wanted to know if you ever had a chance to work with them. And also, models face a lot of problems, especially when it comes to, the males and all that. So I wanted to know if you had if you experienced some of those issues when you were a model. And also wanted to know if you're still a model right now, or you're concentrating on the computer, the IT. And also you're rocking the short hair. You look nice with it.
Thanks for that. Because as you can see, I'm still shy and I worry about my hair. But so we'll talk about that later. So you had a lot of questions. So I think I wrote them down. Right. So STEM career, the hospital for my sorority. And you said, did I ever work with the Kardashians? And then if I had problems in my modeling career, and if I was still a model. So, all right. So I'm going to take it from the top. So from a STEM career perspective, I definitely can give you all quite a bit of information in terms of working in STEM, but a lot of times it really starts with where you are today. So are any of you studying mathematics, computer science? So raise your hand in terms of if you're in engineering programs. All right, I see hands raised. Yay! So you're already on your way to think about a STEM career. But one thing that we're seeing, as I mentioned in the presentation, a lot of young girls are actually moving away from STEM careers, even though they're studying math and computer science, because people are telling them that they can do better somewhere else. Like, oh, it might be easier for you to do human resources, or it might be easier for you to do accounting, because that's where more women are working. Don't be worried about the fact that there's not a lot of women in a job. There's still women there. I'm there. I work in a company now where it's predominantly men. Before I joined this meeting, I was on another meeting where I was the only woman on a call, and there were 10 of us on the call. But that's not stopping me from doing my job. And again, the first part for you is just to continue to hold on to wanting to do STEM careers. And then for the hospital, the actual hospital, my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, that we did in Thika, or I believe it's a different name now, I have to go and pull the list. That actually started in the 1950s. In the 1950s, my sorority donated money to this hospital to help build it. And now, recently, as of this year, the sorority actually went back to Kenya and added more money and is now building the hospital, not just for women, but also for men. So the work continues on. And I think you'll have access to the slide deck, Esther, just let me know. And then I'll make sure the link is there. and we'll give you all more information about the hospital and what we're doing. And if you're interested, let me know and we'll do some more follow up on that. And for the modeling, no, I have not worked with the Kardashians. I'm a lot older now. So the Kardashians are dealing more with people your age. So when I was modeling, so have you ever heard of Leah Kadidi? So she was a very, very, very popular professional model. She's actually from Somalia. So she was in that she was the big name in my day. So no, I have not worked with the Kardashians. I think they're very fun to watch. And I'm not modeling anymore. I finally had to retire. I decided I want to be a computer programmer now. I did my modeling, so now that has since passed. So I only live through modeling, looking at the Kardashians and at the other beautiful women that are in the magazines and things today. So in terms of problems that I had, so when you're asking about problems, are you meaning more of the problems of how I looked, or help me understand the types of problems you're thinking about?
The ones that you faced during your modeling career.
Oh, quite a few. So I think actually the first problem I encountered was that there were not a lot of Black women modeling at the time. When you go to a modeling agency, the first thing they do is look at you to say, all right, how do you look? Are you tall enough? Are you thin enough? Do you have the right face? Are your teeth straight? How can they use you? Because there's different types of modeling. There's some models that only take pictures. There's some models that only do runway, which is what I did primarily. There's some models that actually only show their hand. You'll see like commercials for like lotions for hands and for legs and for arms, and you never see their face. That modeling pays really well too. The modeling I wanted to do was actually the runway. I wanted to walk down the runway and show the clothes because I'm 5'10", I'm very tall, and I was very skinny, as they was. So I knew this would be something that I could at least try to do. But the problem I had was that I was Black. And the problem with being Black as a model, they weren't using a lot of Black models. So they were only looking for maybe one or two. So I would be in a line of girls to where they'd say, all right, we want to pick the models that we'll use for this particular fashion show. If we were in a line of girls where it was like 10 white models and then maybe 5 Black models, all the 10 white models would be picked, but then they'd only pick one Black model. And that's when it became important to me to say, I've got to build a solid foundation. I have to be the best walker. I have to have a clear skin. I have to make sure I'm in shape. If my hair is a problem, I have to make sure I either keep it short or keep it clean, so that it's not a problem for me and it's not seen as a problem for others. I had to take the barriers out of the way so they would look at me and say, oh wow, we want to work with her because she fits that mold. And it's unfortunate that we were put in competition like that, but that was the first problem I faced is how do I stand out in a crowd where they're only looking for one of us because I was Black. So that was the first problem. The other was me being really, 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 really shy, where I just didn't want to. You don't want to be on stage. You don't want to be on stage by yourself. What I had to do to get over that was really just to stop thinking about my own feelings in terms of me being afraid. I looked more at the audience. I looked at the stage, and I thought about my preparation. The fact that my hair was the way I needed it to be. I'm tall, I'm thin, I'm in good shape. I was selected for this, and I know how to walk. And I held my head up high, and I had to tell myself, "You are a beautiful, beautiful woman. You deserve to be here," and that's what carried me. You have to have faith in yourself. You have to believe in yourself, even if deep down inside you have challenges. And it's also to go back to the peer pressure discussion. That actually helps you get over peer pressure. If someone's bullying you because they're saying you're not good enough and you know you are, have that faith in yourself. And it doesn't matter what they say. And there's no need to fight because some people will never change how they feel about you. But you have to believe in yourself and know that you're the best that you can be and you're doing everything to make yourself the best.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'm asking, is it only curiosity and motivation, that led you to succeed?
I think those are two strong things, but not only did my curiosity and motivation led me to succeed, but it was also my family. My family very, very early on instilled in me that you have to work hard to be successful. And I've always worked hard in everything that I've done. So by me being curious and motivated and working hard and having a family, and it may not, and when I say family, it's not about just your mother and father, because not everyone has that scenario. It may be about your community. It's about your teachers. And that's where that word ecosystem came from. It's about the people that are surrounding you that want you to be the best in life. Those are the people that help motivate you. So there's self motivation, but there's also the motivation of those around you to make sure you're succeeding. And there's always going to be people that want to see you fail. Always. Focus on the ones that help you get there. Listen to the ones that want you to fail, because they may be telling you something that you should be aware of that no one else is around, no one else is thinking about. But don't let that stop you. Learn from it and keep pushing forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you talked about building your own brand, did you have like a support system that assisted you? Because like in Kenya, it's all about connection. If you want to be somewhere, you have to have like people who will connect you with something. So did you have like a support system that helped you in building your brand in modeling and all the other careers, computer?
Definitely, because your brand building is you. It's not something you know how to do. So there's companies. So have you heard of marketing? The word marketing, like a marketing department. Yeah, marketing for companies is what actually builds a brand, and they have expertise in that. So when I was modeling, I actually worked with the different agencies. I worked with a lot of the customers and the clients that I worked with to understand how do I build my brand to be successful in a specific place? Because many times it's different. Building a brand in Europe may be very different from building a brand and what you need to do to do that in Africa versus China versus the United States. So it's working with the people around you to understand, all right, where should I focus? What's important? Is it about the relationships? In Europe, building relationships is key because of the widespread nature of the different countries. In China, building relationships is done in a very different way because of the nature of how they work. So it's really working with the people around you to help define what are the important aspects of building that brand.
Can we do? You gave us a very, very lovely promise that you're willing to mentor us until we get somewhere in the global map. What can we do? What measures or steps can we take so that we are somewhere near the candidates of that particular position?
Well, you're actually doing the first thing right now is you're in class, you're in school, you're learning, you're building that foundation. The next thing that I would start to do, because you're all at that age now where you're starting to think, what do I want to be when I grow up? Am I wrong? So raise your hand if you're not thinking about what you want to be when you grow up. All right, I didn't think I'd see any hands. Everyone's thinking about it. Where do I want to do when I'm 20 years old? Do I want this job? Do I want that job? Start thinking about that now. And again, start looking at, well, if I want to be, I'm going to say computer programmer because that's what I wrote down. I want to be a computer programmer when I'm 22 or 23. All right, what do I need to do to get there? What classes do I need to do in high school? What universities should I attend? All right, I don't know anyone at those universities. What do I need to do to get to know that university? Do I need scholarships? It's really just trying to understand how you move forward to get to the next step. And as was said, I am here to help and help mentor you. There's a lot to help to get to those next steps. But I think the question for me is to each of you as an individual, what do you want to be when you grow up? And start really working with you to understand how to define that path.
Hi.
Okay, I was asking, if you want to be a computer programmer, what do you need to major on?
So you can major in universities now, you can major in computer science. Now, I actually switched to be a mathematics major with an emphasis in computer science, but if you want to be a computer programmer, your degree has to be focused around computer programming. So if you're looking at something called computer engineering, that's also another way of saying computer programming. Now, I have worked with enough people that actually did not go to university and they are computer programmers. What they did was they went to what we're calling technical schools or vocational schools, only focused on programming. The only thing I want you to think about there is that it's great that you learn that individual task, but usually at universities, you get a broader education and you learn about dealing with different cultures. You can take different classes to learn about history, political science. It makes you more well-rounded, but it's not a requirement. But definitely focusing on those computer programming classes if you want to be a computer programmer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was asking, is it easy for blacks to live in US? Like it's for you to easy for you to live in Kenya?
I couldn't hear you. Is it, as a black, is it easy for me to live where?
In US.
So have you all seen the news? Are you aware of what's happening in the US? Show of hands if you've seen kind of the back and forth on the news of the US. All right, I'm glad because it's, okay, John. All right, so it's definitely it's difficult. I don't want to say that it's so hard that I'm not able to work. I am definitely able to work. And as the United States has progressed over the years, things have gotten a lot better. But what we've found in the last few years is that the politics around just race relations has almost felt like it's gone in the negative. But all it's done is really made us all aware of just the sensitive nature of race relations across the world. When I lived in Europe, it was very interesting to me to see how you had the Dutch, you had the British, you had Africans living in London, you had people from all over the world, and there were challenges across all those groups. The United States is different because it's really the basis is more white, black, and now we're starting to see more Latinos. So the fight is amongst a smaller group of people, but the challenges are there. But again, remember, you build that foundation, you build that ecosystem, you've got your support system, you build your brand. That has made it easier for me as a black woman to be successful and work with other black to be there. But I'm also seeing more black-owned businesses. You see Oprah Winfrey. You see a lot of blacks in the news today who are making tons of influence, making tons of change. So it's definitely moving in the right direction. And I don't want to say the U.S. is impossible to live in as a black person, but definitely today it's making it a little harder. But again, it's working with the right people, having the right foundation, being curious, and meeting the right people that will support you. That's made it a lot easier.
Thank you.
Mentoring is a privilege, and not many people get a chance to get some of the advantages you have when at school. So this is a privilege you have, and it might benefit you in a very special way. We are all here for a very short time. 4 years is a very short time, and it's not ample time for us to decide where we want to be in the next 10, 20 years. But through these sessions, I think you'll be able to learn more, get to internalize and see how best to maximize on some of these sessions we have. So I'll give it to Esther to give us words and then see how best to do. Thank you very much for listening to Deandra, and we look forward to hearing from you.